guys, welcome to our springtime cuties class. I am Kristen Grunder from Grunderfully Delicious. I hope that you guys all have your cookie kits in front of you. I took this out of the freezer about 30 minutes ago, so it's ready to go. I just want to go over real quick what is in this kit for those of you that have never taken a class. First, we've got our icing. You can go ahead and take those out. Our cookies also, we're just going to go ahead and unwrap those, set those aside when you're ready. We have our nonpareils and our little packet with our practice sheet, some extra piping bags in case we need to cut our hole, a new size. We should have a butterfly stencil as well as a little rectangle scraper. I'm just going to set this aside. Why don't we go ahead and open up our little packet here and I'll show you what's inside. Alright guys, we have our practice sheet which we're going to go ahead and take out. Those little bags that we have in here, we're just going to set those aside. These are in case we cut our hole too big, we can just squeeze the icing in there and rebag them. I'm also going to take this out and set this aside. This is our rice paper. You need to be very careful not to get this wet, so get that out of the way. Our scribe tool, which we'll be using to help in our cookie work. An edible marker. Our photo, which I'm actually going to put in front of me so that I can reference it as I'm decorating. This is going to be our scraper that we're using, and I'll show you how to use that later, as well as our little butterfly stencil. So I'm just going to set those aside, and now I'm ready to start. So I'm just going to go ahead and take out my icing. So if you guys want to go ahead and do that now, that would be great. Alright, once you have your icing out, you're just going to go ahead and just give them a massage while I show you this practice sheet. Also, I want everyone to grab a paper towel. I like to dampen my paper towel because it helps prevent the icing, the crusties of the icing getting everywhere. So it just helps keep my area tidy. So I'm going to set that aside. Also, grab a pair of sharp scissors. I don't like this bulkiness here. I find it gets in the way and sometimes hits my cookies. So I'm going to cut the bulkiness off. I don't want to cut too close to this tape here. I'm going to go ahead and cut just the bulky part off, leaving about 2 inches of the tape. If you cut too close to here, the icing will come up the top, and we don't want icing all over our hands, do we? Some of you might want that. So I'm just going to massage all my bags. But first, I'm going to go ahead and show you the first part of our practice sheet. It's always helpful to get a feel of the icing before you actually start decorating your cookies. I'm going to practice with my dark pink icing. So we have a light pink and a dark pink. I'm going to practice with a dark pink. There is a very specific way to cut your piping bag. If you feel your bag, you can kind of feel that there's a seam, and you can kind of see that as well. Whenever I'm cutting my bag, I always point that seam up toward the ceiling and I center it. I don't know if you can see that. You can't see it on the screen, but there's a seam right here. Anytime I cut my bag, it's pointed up. I center it and flatten the tip with my finger. This is only when I'm cutting my bag, okay? It doesn't matter where the seam is when I'm decorating. This is just for cutting. Centered, flatten the tip. I am going to cut so small that I don't even think I cut my bag. That is how small I want you guys to start, especially if you've never done this before. So I just want to come back over here just to reiterate. We are going to cut so tiny, so tiny, because you can always cut more, but you can't take it back. And we do have those extra bags in case you cut your hole too big, but I always like to just try to do a little smaller than I think I need. So I'm going to cut that straight across, teeny tiny hole. Anytime I cut my bag, I just squeeze the air out onto my paper towel. The way that I hold my bag is I pinch that tape with my thumb and my pointer finger, and I roll the pod so it's nice and tight. While I'm holding this tape closed, I am going to squeeze with these 3 fingers and my palm. I'm always going to keep this tape closed and roll my bag, because even though that tape is there, it's not going to prevent the icing from going up the top when we're squeezing. So I'm always holding that closed. I am holding my wrist steady, that's optional. My goal is to get my dark pink icing as thick as this black line, okay? So I start by touching my tip on the paper, I squeeze gently, and then I lift immediately. As soon as the icing hits the paper, I lift my tip about an inch high, and I just let the icing fall on the line. Because I'm lifting high, I'm going to release the pressure early, lay that line down. Okay, so real quick, I'm going to show you how high that I hold my piping bag. So here we go. So my tip is touching, I squeeze, and I lift. And I just let the icing fall on the line. I am lifting about an inch, maybe an inch and a half high. Release the pressure, lay the line down, okay? Again, my goal is to get my icing as thick as this black line, okay? So I'm going to show you one more time. So if it's thinner, what's going to happen is your icing is going to curl, and if it's too thick, the icing will come out too fast for you. So again, touch my tip to the paper, I squeeze, I lift, just letting the icing fall on that line, okay? Because I'm lifting, release the pressure here, lay the line down. Now, if your line is breaking, that means you need to squeeze the bag a little bit harder. If it's squiggly, either your hole is too small or you are squeezing too hard. And then lastly, you want to keep your tip clean. So I'm often just swiping my tip. I don't want any crusties to build on there. Otherwise, they get in the way of the outline. All right, I'm going to show you. So go ahead and practice those lines. Pause this, and then when you're done, go ahead and unpause. All right, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do the waves and the loops. Again, starting with my tip touching the paper, I lift. This time I'm going a little slower and I'm looking a little bit ahead of where I want that icing to fall, okay? I'm going slower, looking at that black line. When I'm ready to stop, I release the pressure, lay the line down, give my tip a little swipe. Again here, tip is touching, squeeze, lift, look a little bit ahead of where I want that icing to fall, and then release the pressure, tip down. With the circle, we actually do have a few circles, kind of ovals today with our cookies, so I just want to make sure you practice these. Same thing, start with your tip on the paper, lift up, look a little bit ahead of where you want that icing to fall, but this time you're going even slower, and I'm just looking at that black line, looking ahead of where I want that to fall, taking my time, being patient, and then release the pressure, lay that line down. The last thing here that I want to show you is the heart. And what I'm showing you here is that every edge or corner or point of your cookie, you want to put your tip back down, and that's how you get really nice sharp edges. So I'll show you what I mean. I have a starting point here, my tip is touching, I lift up, following that line just like we've been doing, but when I get to the bottom here, to this point, I'm going to put my tip back down. Okay, that's how I have a nice, get a nice edge or corner or point, and I lift up again, and also how I regain control of that icing. When I'm ready to stop, I release the pressure, lay that down. All right, so when you are done with your practice sheet, just fold this in half, set it aside, and we'll go ahead and start taking our cookies out. All right, guys, so we're gonna go ahead and start outlining our cookies. If you want your cookies to look like this photo here, then you are going to wanna make sure that you're watching as I demo these. If you don't really care, then you don't need to watch, but I just wanna make sure that if you want them to look like that picture, be sure to pay attention. So we're gonna start by outlining these. When I show you here on the camera, I'm just going to show you on one of each cookie, but when you guys go to outline your cookies, you're going to outline both birds, both bunnies, okay? We're going to start with the birds. Actually, our featured flavor today is lemon poppy seed, just so you didn't think there was some weird cookie in there. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and start with the birds. So go ahead and start massaging your blue and your white icing. You guys should probably have 2 light pinks in there because I was a little nervous you guys weren't going to have enough for your cookies. So the smaller bag is just extra just in case you run out. So again, I'm centering the seam. Now with the blue icing and the white icing, it's a looser consistency than what we practice with. So that means you guys need to cut your hole a little bit smaller to start, just to make sure it's not going to flow out too fast for you. So I'm centering the seam, flattening the tip, tiny hole straight across. I'm going to squeeze some onto my paper towel. There we go. We're going to start with our bird. Remember to pinch that tape, twist your bag so it's nice and secure. And I am going to start with my tip right under the beak. I touch my tip to the cookie, I squeeze, and I lift immediately. I'm not outlining the beak. The beak is just there, unoutlined. And I'm lifting my tip just like we practice. I'm going as close to the edge of the cookie as I can go. And I just messed up. Oh man, that was fast this time. Usually it takes me a little while longer to mess up, but if you mess up, you do have your wooden scribe tool. I just held up my studio scribe tool, but you'll take your scribe tool, and with this end, you're just going to wipe it off. You can just wipe off your mess up, okay? Make sure you keep that scribe tool clean, because the less crusty on it, the easier it will be to work with. So, just gonna wipe that off and start again. So, start where I left off. Tip is touching, squeeze, and lift. When I get to the tail here, I'm going to put my tip back down, just like we practiced with that heart, okay? Then I will start where I left off. I lift up again. And the outline is great because it helps hold the icing in when we fill in our cookies, so it helps prevent spillage. All right, so I went all the way around the bird. I ignored the little beak. Now I'm gonna add a little belly. So when I'm adding it, I'm looking at the photo just to kind of see how big it is. I don't want it too big because I want to fit a wing on there, but I'm just lifting and curving right here to one end. So you'll outline both birds, and when you're done with both birds, you're gonna outline your bunnies, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead just like before. I'm going to cut my bag. Tiny hole. Seam is centered, tip is flattened, and cut. So with the white, we are very close to exactly how much you need for your cookies. So just be aware of that. Don't like suck all this icing out and eat it right now. So I start by touching my tip here. I squeeze, I lift, and I am going again as close to the edge of the cookie as I can go, making an oval shape. When I get to the top of this cookie, by the ears, I'm lifting all the way to the center of the ears. Okay, so I want to try to hit close to that part of the center of the ear, and then I'm going to outline each ear all the way around. Lifting and my tip goes down, lifting and my tip goes down. And then the inside, lifting again, and this is with our white icing. All right, so you guys go ahead and outline both of those. Pause this, and then I'll have you watch the next step. We're gonna go ahead and outline the flower now that our bird and bunnies are all outlined. Once we're done outlining the flower, we're going to start filling in our cookies. Seam is centered, tip is flattened, small hole straight across. Squeeze that air out. All right, so I'm taking my yellow. It's very important to outline this cookie in the order that I'm showing you. I start from top to bottom. That way it's easier for everything to kind of fall into place. Twisting my bag, starting with my tip touching right here in this indent. I lift up, follow the curve of the cookie, and then my tip goes down right here at this point. Then I'm going to connect them and slightly curve until they meet. Then I'm going to take my light pink. Make sure you give that light pink a good massage. And I'm going to start with my center petal. Starting with the center petal helps me easily figure out where to put the other 2 petals. Okay, so this is also a loose icing, so just be aware of that when you're cutting your bag. Okay. I like to push the icing down, twist the bag. Right here, you can see it kind of curves. That is the shape of our center petal. So when I'm starting, I'm looking here, but I'm gonna go ahead and start straight above it. So my tip is touching, I'm lifting, and again, this is with the light pink. It's going to look white here on the screen, but this is the light pink. I'm going around, and it's a pretty wide petal, almost the same width across from top to bottom, very close to that. I'm going to take my darker pink, make sure my tip is clean, and I like to start on the outsides of these petals, so I have that guide of how the shape goes. So I'm lifting, curving around, and when I get to this area here, I don't want my petals to touch. If you notice, I'm leaving a little bit of a space between each petal so that I can flood them all at the same time, and I don't need to wait for anything to crust. So same thing here. I'm going to bring it in. It's a little bit more narrow up here for these side ones than the middle one. So if you can see that up close, there is space between. None of these petals are touching each other. Okay, then I'm going to take my blue, which we've already cut open, and I am going to add my stem. Tip is touching, I lift, follow that little curve of the cookie all the way to the bottom, and my tip goes down, and right next to it I will do that again. Tip down, and then I want to close the stem. Okay, if you look right here, there's a little point under the petal. That is a guide of where the top of my leaf is. So what I'm doing is, again, I like to start on the outside of the cookie cutter so it can help with my shape. My tip goes down. Now I'm lifting here. There's no shape, but I just want this leaf to kind of blow in the wind, so it's kind of wavy. You can do whatever leaf shape you would like in there. I like the way it looks when it's kind of curvy and wavy. So when I get here, again, it's waving in the wind. Okay, go ahead and pause, and then when you're done, start it. Oh my gosh. Now that we are done outlining these cookies, I'm going to go ahead and start filling them in. So we're going to start with our blue bird. If I tried to fill this cookie in with this itty bitty hole, it would take way too long, and my bag might burst, or my icing might crust. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-flatten that tip, cut a little bit more. Again, you can always cut more. If you cut too big, it's just going to flow out too fast on you. Really, really, really pinch that tape and twist the bag, because we're going to be squeezing even harder. And here we go. So before I was telling you to lift up, right? Now we're actually going to hold our tip close to the cookie, almost touching the cookie. And as I squeeze the bag, I'm going right up against that outline that I've made. You can also kind of jiggle your tip and push the icing up against the outline. That is why we want to hold our tip close to the cookie, so we can kind of direct it where we want it to go. So I'm just going around the edge, kind of wiggling my tip in there to smooth it out at some points. You do have to move quickly, otherwise it will start to crust, but I'm just going to go ahead and fill that in. Again, holding my tip close, because if I'm lifting, I have no control of where that icing goes. If you notice too, I am filling this in all the way. Look, there's no holes. If you are having to use your scribe to kind of push the icing around a lot, that probably means you didn't add enough icing. Once it's filled to this, what we're going to do is hold that scribe like a pencil. There's some ways you can smooth it out. You can use your scribe and kind of jiggle the surface. You can kind of gently stab the cookie and give it a little shake. But yeah, I like to just jiggle the surface, or use my tip of my bag and jiggle as I flood, and I don't even have to use a scribe at all to smooth it out. If you get little peaks, make sure you're just keeping this scribe clean and you just barely touch the surface of the cookie. Okay, and then once your blue has smoothed out, you're going to take your white. You can cut your hole bigger as well. And I'm going to fill in the belly right away. I like to go right up against, you guys can't see, can you? Here, if I hold it like this. Right up against the blue. I am holding this so awkwardly right now. What about like that? There we go. Squeezing. My tip is very close, and once it's filled in, see how I can kind of jiggle my tip in there? I'm not squeezing now, I'm just kind of jiggling and slowly lifting, and it should smooth out. Now before you move on to your next cookie, you want to make sure icing is not spilling over the edge. If it is, it's a quick fix. You'll just take your scribe tool and swipe around the edge, but you have to catch that right away. Otherwise, if it spills over and you don't catch it within like 3 minutes or so, and you go back and you do that, it's going to crush the surface of your cookie and mess it up. So make sure you're checking that before you move on to your next cookie. Once you're done with both birds, you're gonna go ahead and flood your bunnies, and I'll show you how to do that. So watch as I do this, and then go flood your bunnies and your birds. So I like, again, tip is close to the cookie, squeezing gently as I go around the edge or the outline. And then now I can squeeze more, and if it's coming out too slow, just cut your hole a little bit more. Again, I just want to remind you to hold that tape closed and twist the bag. It will really help prevent that icing from coming up the top. We're going all the way around and around. Okay, it's not smooth yet. I have a little bit of spot that I missed, so what I'm going to do is hold my scribe like a pencil. I am just on the surface, kind of jiggling that to where I want that to go. Stabbing the bunny gently, giving a little shaky shake, and there we go. So go ahead, and I'm going to check and make sure nothing's spilling over. We're all good. But go ahead and flood your bird and your bunnies, and then turn me back on. All right, once these are filled in, you're going to start filling in your flower. Starting with my middle petal with the light pink. I'm not actually going to cut my light pink hole bigger because I need this for my egg still. So I'm just going to fill this in. Again, this is the light pink, and it's really easy to smooth it out if you've added enough. Jiggle, 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 kind of slowly lift up the tip of the bag as I'm jiggling. Now I'm going to cut my dark pink bigger. So I did not cut my light pink bigger because we needed that small hole still, but with the dark pink, I can go ahead and cut that bigger. I'm not going to fill in the yellow section of the flower because I want these petals to crust. I find when you let things crust, they kind of add a little bit more dimension, as well as separation and cleanliness of like the lines. Okay, so if I were to fill in this yellow right away, it would kind of maybe distort the lines of the petals, of the tops of the petals. So I'm just going to hold off on that. Then I'm going to go ahead and fill in the leaves. I'm not going to fill in the stem because I want these leaves to crust. Crusting takes about 3 minutes or so. If you have a fan at home, that would actually help crust it a lot quicker. But it just adds a little bit more dimension to the cookie if you allow things to crust. So you're going to fill in, as soon as you're done with your bunnies and your birds, you're going to fill in your flower. So you guys can go ahead and do that now. right, so here we go. We're gonna start our eggs. If you have time, I would definitely fan your cookies with either a piece of paper or an actual fan during this time. Also, the fan helps keep the cookie nice and shiny. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and take out my butterfly template. We're gonna go ahead and take our marker and trace this template. Some people like to put the butterfly kind of at an angle. I'm more of a center kind of girl, so you can do however you want. But when I am outlining this butterfly, I'm not really pressing down very much with the marker. Because the cookie is so buttery and delicious, the grease will get onto the marker if you push too hard. So you just want to lightly press, and you're going to outline this butterfly. All right, oops. There we go. Once your butterfly is outlined, you're gonna take your dark pink, and I like to touch my tip onto the cookie. I'm straight up and down, and I'm squeezing until I get about an M&M size dot on the side of my butterfly. Same thing with the yellow, squeeze until I get an M&M size dot. And then lastly with the blue, squeeze. There we go. There's our three colors. And I'm going to take this little scraper that we've made for you and press down and kind of go at an up and down motion, putting pressure on the cookie as I go and do that. My goal is to get it thick enough to see the color, but thin enough to where I can see the butterfly that I traced. So can you guys see that? You can still see that butterfly. I'm gonna go ahead and wait 3 minutes before I outline this butterfly. If I added the light pink right away, it would kind of spread out a bit and not be as clean of an outline. So I'm gonna wait 3 minutes, and then I'm going to outline it for you. So go ahead and work on that, and then I'll see you in a sec. Once this has crusted for 3 minutes, we're gonna go ahead and outline. And again, this is our light pink icing. It's not our white, it's our light pink. Now I'm going to outline the butterfly. So I'm starting with my tip on the cookie. Oops. And then I'm just kind of holding it close as I outline, as I trace this outline. So it's better to leave any black marker on the outside of the butterfly, because everything on the inside is going to show, but the outside of the butterfly is all going to be covered with icing. So I'm trying my best just to leave any black outline on the outside of my cookie, and then I will outline my egg again in light pink. I always outline my cookies with whatever color I'm filling the cookie in with. All right, we're going to let that crust, and while we're letting that crust, we can go ahead and fill in the other section of our bunny, the ears. I'm going to take my white, squeeze the icing down, twist the bag, and fill in the ear. Jiggling my tip in there, pushing that icing around. Now you can fill in the center of your ear whatever color you would like, whatever color your heart desires. But I'm going to go ahead and fill that in right away. I'm going to use my light pink. So it's the white first, and then you flood the other color right away, and then you'll do your other ear. You'll still want to check and see and make sure icing isn't spilling over here, okay? You don't want any melty ears. And then the light pink right away. If you see, I did one ear at a time because I just don't want any of this to crust. I want the pink in the ear to look the same level as the white in the ear. Once you're done with that, you can take your flower, and as long as you've waited about 3 minutes, it should be ready to finish filling in. And this is actually going to complete our flower. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in the yellow section. And if you notice, there are little nonpareils, little white sprinkles on there. I don't want to add those immediately because what will happen is they'll just sink into that yellow icing. So I want to wait a minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those nonpareils out in front of me so that I don't forget about them. But I'm going to finish the rest of this cookie. And then I'll add, as long as I've waited about a minute, you should be safe to add those nonpareils. I'm just going to fill in the stem. Ta-da! So it's act like I waited a minute, but I like to actually pinch the nonpareils and just drizzle them on. I find that if you dump them on like this, kind of tap them on, they come out too fast and sometimes all in one area, and I kind of like to spread them out a little bit. Okay, I'm going to show you how to do the details on our bird. So let's go ahead and go up close to our bird. So here we go. We're going to start our details on our bird. A little bird. I'm going to start with the little beak. I like to hold it facing up. And I'll take my light yellow and I'll outline the beak. And then I'll fill it in right away. Jiggle, jiggle, jiggle until it's nice and smooth. Okay. Then with the wing, I want you guys to practice a couple shapes of wings before you do it on your cookie. Okay, because you can't really wipe this off. Let me fix this a little bit. Yeah, you can't, now that we're doing details, you can't really just wipe it off. So I'm going to take my blue. So I want you guys to practice this. And I'm going to make a half circle and then a point. Okay, I'm going to fill it right away. And if you go a little too small, it's okay because you can kind of reshape it as you're filling it. But you want to leave enough room for the eyes before you do it. Okay. So as long as the base is crusted, then you can start your wing, your details. So I'm going to really massage this gray, okay? And I'm going to start with a teeny, teeny, tiny hole. Just like with the wing, I want you to practice these eyes first before you do it on your cookie, because it's very easy to mess up the eyes. This bird can look like she was out all night long partying, or she can look nice and clean looking. So there is a way that I like to do this. So definitely squeeze the air out of your bag before you start. But I like to go ahead and make two teeny, 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 tiny dots with my gray, kind of like the width of what I want the eye to be. And then I like to hold my tip kind of close to the cookie as I make my U shape. But that's why I want you to practice. I want you to see what works for you, because lifting might help you. Now I'm going to do a kind of like a line. Tip is lifting and then it goes down, and then one kind of next to it and down. So the top one's a little bit longer. Lastly, she's gonna get a little cheek. So I just wiped off my dark pink, and I'm gonna almost touch my cookie to my tip to the cookie, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze until I get the size cheek that I want, and then lift. And so bird's done, our flower is done. Let's see, I'm gonna scooch this back. We're gonna finish our egg now. Remember, at any point here, you guys can pause the video to work on your cookies. But we're gonna go ahead and flood our egg At this point now, I can cut my light pink hole bigger. And we're gonna go ahead and fill this in. For the egg, because it is such a large area to fill in, I kind of like to try to smooth out as I go down the cookie. So I'm filling in this top section, jiggling it, and then smoothing out, and then moving on to the next section that I want to do. This is going to also get sprinkles like our little flower, so I want you to wait a minute before you add that to your cookie. I'm going to show you right away, but you're going to imagine that I waited a whole minute. So I'll do this side. I like to, again, push my tip onto the outline as I'm filling in to kind of cover the outline that I've made. Almost touching the cookie, but not quite, dragging it on there. All right, she's filled in. And now I'm going to, take my scribe and fix anything I need to fix. Once that's done, and I've waited about 1 to 2 minutes because it is pretty loose icing. Or actually, before you do that, you can take your scribe. If you want to carefully drag some icing down to each point, kind of sharpens the image a bit. Just make sure you keep your scribe nice and clean. And then I'll drizzle my nonpareils after waiting for a minute. Our last cookie that we're going to do is going to be our bunny. So I did get a nonpareil on the bunny's face, but what I'm going to do is just gently take my scribe. Actually, if I put a little bit of icing on the end of my scribe to make it sticky, I can kind of pick it up. Let's see. Ta-da! Okay. So now we can go ahead and start taking apart our wafer paper. So you should have a nice long piece of wafer paper. I like to actually cut each color so that it's easier to handle as I'm popping these out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this up. This is rice paper, so it is edible. I'm just going to put my finger underneath the image and gently pop it out, okay? If it's not popping out easily, you're going to hold the image and kind of pull gently, gently, gently pull that wafer paper away from the image. Some of them are going to take a little longer to pop out, and if that's the case, just take your time. You have a few extra flowers that you can use, so in case any break. But I'm just going to pop those out. You guys ready to complete our final cookie? I can't believe it. Okay. Should I zoom in for this? I'm going to zoom in for this so you guys can see it real well. Okay. To finish our little bunny, we're going to start with the headband. I like to start with the headband. I want to make sure you guys wait about 3 to 5 minutes for those ears to crust before starting your headband, because you don't want to wreck your ear because it's still too wet. So I'm going to take the butterfly gently and kind of curve in the wings. I don't like these to lay flat on the cookie. I like them to have a little bit more dimension. So I do kind of puff up the sides gently. I'm going to take my white icing and very carefully, I like to start with the butterfly. I'm just going to do the tiniest little dot of white icing. And I'm just going to very carefully place my cute little butterfly. If you need to, take your, I keep grabbing my studio scribe, but take your scribe and just gently press it against that white icing. Now it might move around a little bit. The icing needs to dry. So if that little white dot is still wet, it's going to be really easy to move around the butterfly, but just keep it where it's at. Don't mess with it, and it should dry in place. Then I like to kind of look at where my center is, not the center of the bunny, but the center from this wing to the end of my ear. That's the first flower I'm going to put on. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my light pink flower, and I'm going to curve in the petals just a little bit. I'm taking my little white dot and gently placing it on the cookie, using my scribe to kind of gently press it on that white dot, but don't be too rough with it. If you've used a fan and it's been a little while, then you can be a little more rough, but if you're going through these quickly and they're not drying, you need to be very, very, very careful. Now I'm going to add 2 more dots on either side of that flower. Taking my purple flower, I'm just going to put that right there. Use my scribe to kind of gently press it on that dot. And then the dark pink flower, it's going to go right there. Again, I'm not pressing it in very hard. I'm being very gentle. Once that's done, I'm going to take my yellow and add little yellow dots in the middle. So I touch my tip to the paper, squeeze, then lift. Squeeze until I get that size dot that I want, and then lift. We're going to add the eyes. Again, you want to practice those eyes first, but I'm going to start again with those little dots as my guide. Another thing you can do, actually, since you have a marker, is you can wait to add the eyes until your cookie's completely dry, and then you can draw the eyes on with the marker. That is an option for you guys. You want to wait a few hours before doing that, maybe like 4 hours before using the marker on the cookie, but that might be easier to do the eyes. Okay, then long lash, little lash. Okay, so she's got her eyes, she's resting. Now I'm going to add the little pink nose, and to do the little heart nose, I'm going to add 2 dots that are not touching each other, okay? If they were touching each other, I'm not going to be able to create a heart. Now that I've made my dots, I'm going to take my scribe and gently drag those points to each other. And there she's got a little heart nose. And lastly, she's going to get some cheeks, so I cleaned my dark pink off. Squeeze, 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 release, then lift. Squeeze, 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 release, then lift. And there she is. She's so cute, and she knows it. All right, guys, so those are our cookies. We've got our bunny. Let's back these up. Our egg, our bird, and our flower. There we go. A lot of cookies today, guys. So thank you so much for joining me. Yeah, I hope to see you next time, next month. I'm not sure the design yet, but I will be sure to let you know. I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful Easter, and I'll see you later. Bye.